Hi everyone. Oh, sorry, you all right. It's not a good start. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Alana Aarons. I'm the CEO of endeavour Victoria. We welcome you all here today. I need this. Before we formally get started, we would like to acknowledge and appreciate the original custodians of the land, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and their elders past, present and emerging. So on behalf of the Social Blueprint and the Caulfield Shule, we'd like to formally welcome you all here this evening. We were a little overwhelmed, I think, as the bookings started coming in. So this is obviously, you know, an area of interest for many of you. So thank you for taking the time to come out. We thank each of our panellists here who have given of their time this evening for the community to find out more about this. Greg will go into that in a little more detail shortly. But I guess in the first instance, there are many B'nai B'rith members here, but many who are not. B'nai B'rith is a community service organisation. There is a pamphlet on every other chair that just explains a little bit about B'nai B'rith. I think many people have heard of B'nai B'rith, but don't necessarily know what we do in the current stage. So, you know, for those of you who are interested, there is some information about B'nai B'rith, and we hope you take the time to get to know who the organisation is now in the current age, because we do have much to offer the community. So, one thing I'd also like to do before we go any further is thank Europa on Alma. There's a gentleman by the name of Chris over there. He's got a bit of a wave. Europa on Alma is a retirement village that's opened up on the kind of Nepean Highway end of Alma Road. Europa is very, very kindly sponsored this evening. We thank them, and if you want to find out more about Europa specifically, you can contact or see Chris at the end when you're having a cup of coffee. But again, there's a brochure in your bags. But without further ado, I am going to pass you over to this evening's moderator, Greg Lowe, and he will let you know how the rest of the evening will proceed. Thanks.
Okay. Can everyone hear okay? Okay. I want to start out with some amazing news, which is that we are in the golden age of medicine. Is that okay? There you go. That's the spot. Okay. Seriously, friends, we are in an age, I'm not sure if you realize this, but in the last 100 years, life expectancy has doubled. After staying the same for a couple thousand years, it's doubled in 100 years. And I have no reason to doubt that by the time our grandchildren are older, 100 years can easily be the median average age. But along with that comes some other issues that we have to tackle, which is how do we live longer but on a higher quality level, and how do we pay for it, and just all those knock-on effects that happen as we age. And so to cover this, we thought it was best to break it down into 3 buckets tonight, which is firstly home care, then retirement villages, and then aged care as well. And it's also a 4th bucket, which it's apropos because we're in Caulfield Shule, which I would call the spiritual bucket. And thank you, Rabbi Raven, because what's the point of living a very, very long life if you're not living a connected life with purpose, and really those types of connections, as I mentioned, it's so, so important to have hope for why to be alive tomorrow. And not only that, it also feeds into the research which shows that the average connected person that is a member of a religious organization lives 7 years longer. So clearly there's correlation. Yep, you should. Thanks, ChatGPT. So, anyway, and we are in each area. We have an expert tonight, although there is a slight wrinkle that we will cover as well. Of course, we're joined tonight by Tull Roseby, who's an expert on home care. We were going to be joined by Jessica Kinneart, who is an absolute expert in retirement villages, but unfortunately she has COVID. Saying that, we're here because Rodney Horin, not only does he know aged care, which he's going to talk about in detail, but we will also make sure to cover retirement villages. And if nothing else tonight, we all want everybody to know, if you do have an issue, there are resources where to go, and that you're not alone. And with that, Tull, most people want to stay home as long as possible. So maybe for tonight, I'll have each person give a little bit of an overview of their particular area. Then we'll go into Q&A. There are representatives around from B'nai B'rith, from Jewish Care. If you have a private question, there are plenty of people to help. But before we get into it, I just want to give one little talk about the social blueprint and what we are. Most people know the social blueprint really for the videos and our interviews, but we are so much more than that. We are a true resource for this incredible Melbourne and even the Sydney Jewish community as well. We have an events calendar, so many organizations, I've lost track of how many, over 500 I believe are signed up right now. And it's all categorized into different areas, whether it be social, age, life cycle, whatever it may be. There is so much there. Please sign up because, did it go out? That's better. I promise you, it'll be well worth it. You have no idea just how much the Melbourne community has. And now, Tull, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's the other way.
The other way. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. So, we've all heard home is where the heart is. There's no place like home, and even don't you dare take me out of my home. These are just a few sayings that most of us will say at some stage in our lives if we haven't already said it. And they ring true today, perhaps more than ever. As we mature through life, the place we call home often increases in importance, and we want to remain living there independently for as long as possible. And yet, many people put off thinking about and actually receiving the support that they need to help them stay right where they want to be. Staying at home longer is a more viable option today than it ever has been. With government funding available to those who need it, and in fact today, for the first time in history in this country, there are more home care packages, government home care packages available than there are residential aged care beds, which is only as of last year. Home care has also changed a lot over the years in the way it is provided and the approach of those delivering it. So much so that it not only can be a positive and enriching experience, but an opportunity to become more independent and to improve all sorts of aspects of life. When done well, home care is designed to put you firmly in control of what your care looks like. And these days, it's really about supporting you to live your life the way you want it. So, what exactly is home care and how does it work? Well, like most things, care means different things to different people. And depending on your stage of life, your health, your needs, and your own personal goals and lifestyle choices. Care at home enables highly tailored solutions designed specifically for you. Now, the type of services that are available are wide and varied. Sometimes people just need a few hours of help around the house each week. A bit of cleaning, some help changing the bed sheets, getting the vacuum into those hard to reach spots. This is often a great and very gentle way to start with home care. So you can get used to somebody in your home, what works, what doesn't work, and what you most need as you get along. The next level of care can also be support with things like cooking, food preparation, or somebody to take you at appointments, going out for coffee, your favourite cafe. Perhaps you don't want to drive anymore, maybe you need somebody to take you to the supermarket, whatever it may be. And then personal care, that next level again, is things like showering, bathing, grooming, and getting yourself up and about. And for those who unfortunately living with physical constraints or long-term illnesses, or perhaps dementia, for example, you can then get more comprehensive and involved care, sometimes 24-hour care around the clock, and somebody actually living in your own home. Home nursing is also available for clinical care, including things like wound dressing and medication. Everyone wants to know how much it costs. So, home care can either be funded privately, or you can access government funding care, which government funded, but I'll come back to in a second. Or you can actually combine both. So you can get the government funding and top up with private care as well. Privately funded care, it's pretty simple. You usually get charged an hourly rate, and you get to choose as many hours or as few hours as you like. The government funded care, however, of course, is a little bit more complex. So there are two main programs of government funded care. One is called Commonwealth Home Support Program, or CHSP, because we love an acronym. And this provides really an entry level into home care. Allied health and things like transport and cleaning. These programs are generally provided by local councils or large non-for-profit organisations. You generally don't have a choice of which provider you get, and although the Commonwealth Home Support Program is government funded, you will have to pay a little bit to add to that for contribution. And then you've got home care packages. We've probably heard about home care packages over the last couple of budgets. It has been a political football, but what we've done is we've added a lot more. As I said before, we've got more home care packages today than we ever have in history. This is a much more comprehensive care program that provides you with a set amount of funding each year that you can spend on your care, services, products, or equipment associated with your care. And there are 4 levels of home care packages, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and they provide anywhere between $9,000 a year to $53,000 a year, thereabouts. You do have more choice and control over the care and support that you receive, and the provider that you choose. It's your choice. But you have to also be aware that it takes a really long time to get a home care package. They are capped, so you've got between sort of 3 and 12 month waiting list. Sorry, that was supposed to be up before. Applying for a home care package, again, it's a process. So you've got to call an organisation called My Aged Care. You get assessed, somebody comes to your home, and you get an assessment team to provide you the level of package that they think that you require. You've got to wait a little while, as I said, sometimes between 3 and 12 months. Then you have an income tested fee, which is means tested. It's all very confusing. And then once that package is allocated, you choose your provider. Choosing a provider. Many years ago, you didn't have a choice. Today, you've got a plethora of organisations to choose from. So how do you choose it? Really, I think we're going to provide you some questions that I think that it's worthwhile asking your provider when you get down to that point. First of all, is the provider a registered provider with My Aged Care, so a government organisation? Providers must be registered and they must meet a very high quality standard, which are regularly assessed. Do the caregivers have qualifications? They must. And what type of training, ongoing training, do carers get from the organisation? Does the provider directly employ their caregivers? Some care providers provide what they call a care management component, but they actually subcontract the care to another organisation. Now this can work, especially if the needs are fairly straightforward, not complex, but where you need higher needs, you're receiving a lot of hours, I think it's better to go to a provider directly. And one of the most important things I think is feeling comfortable with obviously the person that's coming into your home. So for some people, not everybody, especially if they're having a caregiver in their own homes for long hours, it's important that they understand cultural background, they have things in common, or they have good conversation, or even gender from a male and female perspective. So their organisation, how do they do it? How do they enable it? And at the end of the day, what happens if you just don't like the person who got to your house? So what can you do about that? And that's a question that's worthwhile asking. So how do I know about all of this? Well, because of this incredible, strong matriarch of our family, my grandmother. A very long story, but we struggled to find the right care and the right caregiver for my grandparents. So we eventually did, but it was far too many phone calls and wasted time. Time that my grandfather could have spent at home rather than in hospital. Finding good quality care, I thought, should be easy. In fact, it should be a given. We as a family were able to keep my grandmother at home until she passed away in her sleep, peacefully, exactly the way she wanted it at 101. So I decided, not only is it an honour to care for those who once cared for us as younger years, it's our duty. That's the reason why Absolute Care and Health was born. But thank you very much.
Rodney?
Rodney, there you are. And maybe to speak about retirement villages first, just to keep it in the general cycle order.
Good evening, Rodney. Horin's my name. I'm filling in for Jessica Kinnear, who unfortunately tested positive yesterday for COVID. But because we've worked so closely, I can address some of the issues that she has areas of expertise in. And just to sort of join the dots, the three of us were talking tonight because we work closely together on a regular basis, because often people come to us, might come into our office, but really they are looking for home care, and we refer to Tull, or else they may actually be really looking for retirement living, and we refer to Jessica. And it's important that we all work with each other's respective area of expertise. So while I might be able to talk to some of the detail that you'll see in Jessica's slides, I can certainly impart to you some very, very important and distinct differences between retirement living and aged care, an experience that I personally encountered when I was looking for my late mother. Like Tull, I'm standing here being able to talk to you today because of a personal experience trying to transition my own mother into care. So it certainly helps having that background. So if I go back, yeah, okay. So this slide is probably the most important one. If Jessica was here tonight, she'd certainly be emphasising it. It is extremely important. We want you to leave tonight with a few key messages to take home. There's going to be a fair bit of information, and we don't want you to experience information overload, but if you can leave with a few key pertinent pieces of information that really distinguishes between the three speakers and the three areas, we hope it's going to be beneficial to you. And in relation to retirement living, you must be capable of living independently. And that's the major difference between retirement living and aged care living. If you need care and you can't cope independently day to day, retirement living or independent living is not for you for a variety of ways. Most importantly, it's the wrong place for you to be care-wise now and in the future, in the short-term future. But financially, it's a very, very complicated model, and you do not want to get caught up in the financial model of retirement living unless you think you're going to be there for a fair amount of time, 5, 7, 10 years. So it's distinct from government-funded residential aged care where care services are provided. Care services are not provided in retirement living. Tull service can be brought in to retirement living. You can be in a retirement village, independent living, and bring in home care. That's fine, because where you're living is equivalent to living in your own principal place of residence, so that's no difference there. And of course, you should satisfy yourself that the village meets your requirements as far as lifestyle and care proposition it offers now and into the future. Moving in to retirement living is not an investment by any stretch of the imagination. It's a lifestyle decision. So, if I knew how to do this, Where are my kids when I need them? Okay, there's a bit of an industry snapshot, but I won't go through those details, just one part of the slide. That tells you the average age of residential care is between 75 and 84. About 90% of people in residential care are in that age group. So you wouldn't want to go in at the top of that age group because the chances are you wouldn't stay in for very long and you might need to move into care and you'd have all those issues of transitioning. What have I done? Mikey, where are you? Okay, thanks guys. Hey. Okay, so some of the differences, again, I won't speak with enormous expertise because it is, as I said, and a lot of the expertise required for retirement living is you need legal advice. Unlike aged care, where you'll need an appropriate financial advisor to guide you through, when it comes to retirement living, you do need a lawyer because you are confronted with an enormous contractual obligation, an agreement. Many of the operators have 2 or 3 options that they present to you, and it's not for the faint-hearted to go through on a DIY exercise. You need legal advice to enter residential care. So there's various different types of villages. One of the other important distinctions to make, it may not mean a great deal now, but it does when it comes to the legal ramifications, is the aged care sector is governed by Commonwealth legislation, and residential retirement village and independent living is governed by state-based, the Retirement Villages Act, and varies from state to state. And there are some major significant differences in relation to that. So you don't know whether you could be entering a strata retirement village or some sort of lease arrangement. You just don't understand that, and there's many options out there and you need legal advice to advise you correctly. Again, just quickly going through the financial model. The box on the bottom right-hand side is a typical financial arrangement. It's referred to in the industry as a deferred management model. And what that predominantly means is you might pay 30-35% as an entry fee, you might pay another 4 or 5% for the next 5 or 6 years, and then there'll be an exit fee when you leave. And you've entered this for lifestyle, not for investment. Often there can be provisions to make good, replace the kitchen, the bathroom, the carpet, the painting, etc. So there are an enormous amount of obligations and you need to know what you're up for before you enter. And when I wear my next hat for an aged care advisor, if you do ask me what is one of the most difficult aspects of advising anyone entering aged care, it's much more difficult to transition someone from retirement village living to aged care than it is from home to aged care. Because if you need to transition from the retirement world into aged care, you'll need that exit money. You'll need the funds to fund your bond, your RAD. And you don't always get ready access to it. They've got to sell the unit, they've got to make good. Could be a couple of years before your funds are realised. Although there are some provisions in there that they do have to contribute towards your bond if they can't get it out by a certain time. But again, that's the devil in the detail, and that's under the Act as well. So the main differences about that I want you to take home in relation to Jessica's section here tonight is it's certainly caveat emptor, buyer beware. You need good quality legal advice, someone who's a specialist in the area to guide you through it. And let me give you a little bit of background on Jessica because it's really important. For years, in the early years of when I started doing this service and someone needed some advice in the retirement area, we could not find a lawyer who had any specialty in that area. Most of the lawyers were working in the big firms acting for the village developers or operators. You couldn't get someone on the other side. Jessica honed her skill by working for those big legal firms, your Russell Kennedys and your Minters, etc. And then she went to Lend-Lease as well. So she got tremendously deep experience working on the side of the providers, and then she saw a niche. And she set up her own boutique business called Village Advisors, where she acts for those entering. And she's been a godsend to us. We've watched her enormously help so many people through the process. So I hope there's some sort of pointers that come out of this section of the talk and presentation. All right, I might introduce myself in the next section.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I'm not Jessica.
Take off your jacket.
My name's Rodney Horin. I'd like to talk to you about aged care. Actually, I've got a funny story to tell you in a minute about my daughter. So, I, like Tull, have a personal experience, and how I know a little bit about residential retirement village from Jessica's section is I nearly made an enormous mistake with my own late mother, and I'd like to share that with you so others don't. When I had many trips late night in the back of an ambulance to the Alfred Hospital with my mother, or also like, as Tull mentioned, many people certainly don't want to end up necessarily in an aged care facility, and they only want to come out one way. My mother was of that background as well. So we tried our best to keep her at home. 1 carer, 2 carer, 3 carers around the clock. It was a fruitless exercise. It was incredibly expensive. We didn't know Tull in those days. It would have been a lot cheaper if we did, correct? Yeah. So it's very expensive. Many late night trips. I get a phone call from the night carer, run over there, back of an ambulance at Alfred. Finally, the hospital, bit of authority, puts a foot down and said, your mother can't go home. Well, she wasn't going to listen to me. I'm only a schlepper's son. But she listens to the authority of the hospital. And I said, what do I do now? And they said, I don't care what you do. We need this bed back in 3 days. You've got to go out and find your mum an aged care bed. So the next day I took a day off. It was a miserable day. I visited 7 facilities, and unbeknown to myself, I got to work the day later and sought some professional advice. Only 3 of the facilities of the 7 I visited that day were aged care. The first place I walked into, I thought was a nice facility. I could sell the concept to my mother. Nice grounds, nice buildings, people all walking around with the same sort of profile as her. And I went up to inquire about aged care. And they said, this is not aged care, you're at the wrong place. So what are you talking about? Everyone around here looks like my mother. I said, if this is not aged care, what is it? They said, this is retirement living. I walked into the Classic on the corner of Thomas Street and Brewer Road. So if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I knew the difference between retirement living and aged care, the answer is unequivocally no. And I went to 3 other places that day, also weren't aged care. One was independent living, one was a state-based hostel. So it's very easy. Again, what I want to the message I'd like you to take home today is you must choose the right facility for your loved one that has the right care needs for that person now and in the future. And it's got to be the appropriate home, else you can make a costly mistake. We know, we've had clients come into us that have gone into the Menzies, opposite Giorgio's in Melbourne Road, or they've gone into the Classic thinking it was aged care. It takes enormous an effort to unwind that situation if you can, and you've cost your mother or your loved one the wrong level of care, and certainly you can lose a lot of dollars in the process. So, I've got a few slides. I hope I can simply talk to them and break it down in an easy to understand way. But just with this basic slide, first of all, just some statistics. Currently there's 180,000 people in residential aged care in Australia, and by 2050, not that long, 27 years from now, they expect that to quadruple to 750,000 people. So we're an ageing population. And what does all that mean? It means there's going to be stress and pressure all the way through the system to accommodate. But let me try and break down the complexities of aged care, because I actually think, unlike residential care, the infrastructure pertaining to aged care, the Residential Aged Care Act governed by the Commonwealth, is quite transparent and not complicated. But the complication is in the detail, working out the best way to fund it and all the various costs and charges. But the actual system, it's government guaranteed for your bonds, and it's quite transparent, and they're all scrupulous operators in the sector, but the detail is the devil's in the detail. But let me break it down to you. Aged care can be simply divided into 2 parts only. 1, what do you pay for the right to use the room, commonly known as a bond, but now again, as Tull referred, it's a world full of acronyms. A bond is no longer called a bond. It's called a RAD, R-A-D, and that stands for Refundable Accommodation Deposit. So how can you pay that RAD? Well, there's only 3 ways you can pay that RAD. You can pay the full amount up front, which is fully refundable at the end of the day, or if you move, it's fully 100% refundable. The second option, you can pay a cocktail. If it's $1 million RAD, you can put $100,000 down, 200,000, whatever you can raise, and you'll pay interest on the balance. And the third way is you can pay 100% interest on the whole lot. Unfortunately, it's not set by the Reserve Bank. It is set under the Aged Care Act, but it's influenced by the Reserve Bank's interest rate rises we've had in the last year. And that interest rate has virtually come very close to doubling in the last 12 months. 12 months ago, in April 2022, it was 4.01%. Today it's 7.46%. So for example, if you had $1 million bond, $1 million RAD at any Monash, and you're paying interest only, you were paying $40,100 interest annually last year, and now you're paying $74,600 this year. So the cost of funding has gone up dramatically, which means modelling, working out the best way to enter aged care has totally been turned on its head. So that's the first part. The second part, I know there's a few too many words on this slide, but again, I'll try and break it down for you. And the next slide may be more meaningful. Each month, you'll get an invoice for the care needs of looking after your loved one. And I often say, just as we've got through private school fees, and we got invoices every quarter we couldn't jump over, invoices every month at aged care can be twice as large as those quarterly school fees. It is just the way it is. The first fee that everyone is charged, set under the Aged Care Act, is a daily care fee of $58.98. You're taking a photo to show Mark Hammerslake tomorrow, yeah, Denny? Okay, it's $58.98 a day. Everyone pays that. And that figure isn't plucked out of thin air, by the way. It's actually tied to the full pension. It represents 85% of the full daily care pension. So aged care in Australia, we really are a lucky country. Aged care is not denied to any citizen, no one in this room or anywhere else in the community, anywhere in Australia. If you have the means, of course you can afford what you want. Certainly the large middle band, like in all circumstances, it's always a struggle. But if you have no means meaning you're on the full pension and you're not a homeowner, you can qualify and be eligible and receive what they call a concessional bed and not pay a RAD at all, no bond. So aged care is not denied to anyone. And all you would pay is the $58.98 a day, 85% of your full pension. Maybe another charge. There's a second charge often applied, but it varies from facility to facility. It's called an extra services fee, and it can be zero in some instances. If we're talking Tuckless, it's zero at Jewish Care, it's $34 at Emmy Monash, it's $60 at Arcare down the road, it's $50 at Regis opposite Emmy. So it varies from facility to facility. The third fee you'll be charged is the interest rate, if applicable. If you've gone for option 2 or 3 for funding your bond, you'll be charged daily interest. And the fourth fee is the doozy. It's called the Centrelink means tested fee. And it basically means user pays, because the reality is no facility can look after anyone for $58 a day. They need about $350 a day to break even, basically. So the government subsidises the $300 odd, but the government says, if you've got means, we're asking you to contribute, but not forever. You only need to contribute for the first and the second year up to about $31,000, and then when you've reached a lifetime contribution, after about 3 years of $74,000, it stops completely. So it's a user contribution up to a capped amount. So let me put some flesh on the bones what this really means. You'll get an invoice, say it's $1 million RAD. Emmy Monash is an example, $34 extra services. The first fee, as I said, is $58.98 a day. And on a monthly basis, that's $1,769. The next line item is $34 a month, that's $1,020. Interest, if you're paying full interest at 7.46%, $74,600 divided by 365 is $204.38 a day, or $6,131 a month. And the means tested fee is just the $31,000 divided by 365 comes out to $2,606 a month. That bottom, the total of that invoice is $11,527 a month, or if you multiply it by 12 months, it's a scary $140,000 a year. And if you had 2 parents, you could double that to $280,000 a year. So it's mind-blowingly expensive. But there are ways and strategies of trying to get the best result possible, because this won't apply to everyone. It depends on your own particular financial circumstances. You mightn't have a means-tested fee. You might raise the funds and then not have the monthly interest fee. So everyone's financial circumstances are different. So everyone's financial circumstances need to be modelled by a financial advisor who's got some expertise in this area in order to get you the best financial outcome. And the facilities are terrific to deal with. Let me just say one thing. None of us are here to be in a combative situation with the facilities. Aged care facilities, all of them across the board, do a phenomenal job. Very difficult running an aged care facility today. Prices are capped, overheads are rising, many of them struggling to survive. We've seen a number of them have just gone under recently in New South Wales. So it's a really difficult business to run. So that's the basics. I hope that makes sense. But all the other considerations that need to come in, depending on your own circumstances, are so wide and far-reaching. You need to consider whether you're maybe a protected person. If someone goes in, the partner stays behind, they could be protected. That has great significance. Whether you're low means or respite or life expectancy, there's so many other considerations. You need to balance getting that means tested fee as low as possible. You may end up qualifying for social security pension that you've never had in your life as a result of this, because certain assets are exempt for the purpose of calculation some of these fees. So there really is a bit of detail in that. The home, for example, if you're on a pension, is exempt for the purposes of the pension for the first 2 years. It's only valued at about $190,000 for the means tested fee. So there's an enormous amount. Oh, sorry, I'm throwing to the back there. What's the figure, Mike? 193,000, thank you. Good to have some family help in the audience. So I hope that's given you an overview of the aged care world and it being distinctly different. But if there's one take home I want you to walk away with in relation to this, it is planning. Many elderly people, it is a true saying, are only one fall away of needing aged care. Now, if you've got the normal strength and anxiety and stress of looking and caring after a loved one, do yourself a favour and take time, if you can see the signs ahead of you, to meet with someone and work out a plan so you know where you want to go. You know how you're going to fund it. You're ready, your plan ready, your aged care ready. And there's no stronger message than I can urge you to take home and think about this evening. The other thing I want to tell you, just before we finish, my experience convinced me there must be tens of thousands of people every year entering aged care and paying more than they need to. And similarly, to get in, and similarly on a monthly basis. There are strategies and good planning. This is not a DIY exercise. This is not a Bunnings exercise. Anyone who attempts to go through this, one of the first things you learn as a young lawyer is anyone who acts for themselves as a fool for a client. This is not an area you want to try and get through yourself. You need to know at least what you don't know. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Very good speaker.
Tull, Rodney, amazing. Okay, everybody, we know that there are going to be questions, and that's why we specifically left a lot of time for them. So, anybody, wherever you want to begin, just raise your hand.
You all have a particular...
Yeah, maybe just speak right into it.
Okay. You all have a particular area that you're expert in. But when it comes to all of this, you only go to see one person who will handle it all for you? That's a question, sorry.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I think that basically what you're trying to say is who do you go to in which case, and even if, especially if you're not even sure which section you're in.
Fair enough.
if someone comes to see either of us or Jessica, and that we think you're seeing the wrong person, we'll let you know. And sometimes we have meetings all together. I'll have a meeting with Jessica. If you're a couple, for example, it's a little slightly more complicated. You might be no two people age at the same rate. So you might want to go in as a couple to an independent living facility, and one of you, not too distant, too long, might need aged care. So you could need a few of our skill sets, and you might need some home care brought in the meantime. There's some interesting facilities around. Let me just share with you the trend. We all would have seen that large construction come out of the ground where the Bethlehem Hospital is, called Calvary. So that's the trend. That is built on one side, independent living, and aged care on the same side. So two people might go in when they don't need, and they can live independently when they go in, and one, after a period, might need aged care. So rather than going to another site, it's not easy to visit and be around and close by, etc., one can go down the hall into the aged care area. So, but that instance really interesting because you're funding two. You're funding retirement living in aged care, and you might need Jessica in the beginning. You might need us and Tull during that. So it's a good question.
Yeah, what are the costs for this advice? Are you going to pay?
What does it cost?
Yeah, we all charge differently. We charge the most. Our fees? Our advice? Look, it depends what you need. We've got different sectors. Depends how much you need done. You might come in and just need a bit of confirmation what you're doing. It could be an hourly rate. You might need the full-blown service of financial modelling, someone to represent you, to negotiate and guide you the right way and save you a few dollars. Can't guarantee it. And but hopefully we can give you the comfort, and we can give you a roadmap. We go out 5 or 10 years and you'll clearly walk out with clarifying information. You'll have a financial model that shows you how you can fund entry and how you can fund the ongoing monthly expenses. It'll give you the clarity and peace of mind. That's what we aim to do. Yeah. And if you're a Caulfield Shule member, we offer a discount.
Yeah, question. What protection is there for the amount that you put as a deposit, the bond? We've seen organizations going under. What's the protection? Is there
Look, it's
security?
it's when you go into a residential aged care facility, one of the well-known ones that are governed under the Aged Care Act, the Commonwealth Act, your bonds are guaranteed. But it's easily when you read media stories and people losing their life savings and their bonds, they're often what they call state-based aged care facilities, or they could be a retirement village. Again, the devil's in the detail. But the aged care providers that fall under the Commonwealth Government Aged Care Act are really a very secure, transparent infrastructure and sector, and your rates are guaranteed. Yeah.
Any other questions?
What happens to your medical attention? I'm visually impaired, I've got diabetes. What about the medical attention? Where do you get that from?
Sure. Yep.
Maybe
Yeah.
repeat the question.
Sorry?
Maybe repeat the question.
The question was, where do you get medical attention from if you're choosing any of our services? Is that correct? Yeah, so from a home care lens, we provide the care. We work really closely with any of the health professionals that surround you and support you. So we can assist with that, and we work very closely with any of them.
But you go to see your own private doctor?
Yes, yeah.
Keep your private health insurance up. You need to make sure you keep your private health insurance, ambulance subscriptions, all that, yeah.
Thank you.
And if you already have a package or you're dealing with Jewish care, you know they're already charging you for looking after that.
Okay, hang on.
If you're already with Jewish care, but now you're going to go one step further, we're going into, let's say, aged care. Will they still take their fee out on top of your fee and any other fees that might come our way? That's what I'm worried about, the hidden costs.
So sorry, transitioning from home care into residential aged care, and you're worried about the losing hidden costs. Is that right? From a home care perspective, once you go into, so you have a home care package, you've got that home care package. Once you're eligible to go into residential aged care, that home care package stops, and then it moves into the funding that Rodney was just talking about.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. Two questions. First, I don't think we talked about property evaluations and how that affects fees. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. So firstly, we didn't talk about property valuations and how that affects fees. So I wonder if you can talk about that, and if that affects the RAD or any of that. And secondly, if you have any advice for grandparents, or for me in particular, for my grandparents, they very much want to stay at home even though they probably should be in aged care. Give some advice of what I can tell them. Maybe start out with the second one first.
Sure. Yeah, so I had a similar issue with my mother-in-law who didn't want to leave home. Unfortunately, she had pretty advanced dementia, but what we started to do in the initial phases of care was actually bring somebody in just for a couple of hours, just to see and get them used to it, see what it feels like. In the end, actually, it worked out beautifully, and everybody's different, and everybody's story is going to be different. But and then we just slowly increased it over a period of time. We didn't call them carers. It was just somebody coming in to have a cup of tea.
As you do. And the second one, property valuations, right?
I think I know what you're saying. Are you trying to correlate property prices to moving into an aged care facility in the same area?
No. How your property affects how much you pay for the RAD?
No effect whatsoever.
Right.
No effect. But I'll share this. If you're selling a home and moving into an aged care facility in the same suburb, the theory is that selling your home will fund what they're asking for in that suburb. The same operator could be Arcare, they might build the same template in Cranbourne, but they can't ask for the same room rate there as they do in Kooyong Road, because it's based on different property values. But it's interesting, property values have dropped. I'm not sure if RAD prices have. That's another issue. Where's Jewish care? I might ask Jessica that one.
Yeah, I just had this.
With the home care packages, the allowance that you have, if it's not all spent, does that finish up at the end of the year and start again, or is it cumulative?
Great question. So basically, after a year, if you haven't spent it, it tops up again. Yeah. Well, the government have started making murmurs about if you're not spending it, you'll lose it. Yeah. Yeah, correct. So I haven't heard anything since they mentioned it a couple of years ago, but it's possibly coming. So spend it.
First time someone has to spend your money.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. What advice would you have for those of us who are over 75, living on our own and haven't thought about the future? We've had an ageing parent and gone through that. but we're all in the position now of getting into that age group and really not planned or got any thoughts about what we do. What are your thoughts about where we should be going, heading towards 80 and above?
Rodney, maybe I'll give this to you.
As I referenced earlier, start thinking about it. Start thinking of a plan, what you do. The more in advance you do it, it'll take the stress and hassle away, and you'll start seeing what you find out, what your circumstances could provide. And I'll share with you that most people in this room, what happens is the modelling, it can be stretched. We had a situation, I'll just share this story with you to give everyone some hope of what can be achieved. We had a lovely only child come into us, and both her parents were here. It's always double the expense of two, and she wanted the best for her parents. And it was just when Arcare Parkview opened. Arcare on the way to Chadstone, where Red Shunt used to be. Beautiful 6-star resort. And walk in, chandeliers, sauna room, billiard room. It's a place you all want to move into for a couple of weeks. And anyhow, they were asking 1.1 million each for the RADs. That's 2.2 million. And we worked out the monthly fees to keep the two of them were $15,000 a month, $180,000 a year. Okay, so then we said, well, what have we got to work with? She said, oh, my parents got a small ute in Bentley worth about $800,000. Don't laugh, we were able to stretch it. They both were there for 5 years, and one passed on, another one was there for 2 more years. So we were able to stretch that $800,000 for them to be in Arcare Parkview at those prices for 7 years. So your funds can be stretched all different strategic ways. We say to families, you choose the most appropriate place, the best place you want your parents, and give us a chance to see how we can make it work. All right, while I've got the floor here, let me just tell you, some parts of what I do is not always so joyful. My children have just joined me in the business now. So I asked my daughter, now that you've got some time, can you do me a favour and do a bit of shadow shopping? Find out what our opposition are offering and charging. So I hear her, she makes a phone call, and I can tell by her answers what the questions are. I'm looking for my father. Okay. No, he's got very severe onset dementia. What type of room, they must have said? Oh, we'd like a high security room that we can lock it from the outside. Location, pretty important to be near you, I imagine. Yeah, far north Queensland would be close enough. That's what happens when your children join you in the aged care business.
And also Tull wants to add something.
Yeah, I was going to say, just with regards to planning, and I talked about, there was a lot of information before, but with the home care packages, there's 4 different levels, level 1, 2, 3 and 4, level 1 being the least obviously and level 4 being the most. If you think at any particular point that you're eligible for a level 1, I'd suggest get into the system, because it's much easier to get into the system at level 1 rather than trying to get in at level 4. So it's as I said, the waiting list can be up to a year. At level 4, you need it a lot more than level 1.
Hi, I just wanted to inquire, with your services, Tull, what sort of interest rates, self-managed funds do you deal with? As a provider? As a provider.
Yeah.
And you have self-managed funds as well?
Yeah, no, we don't deal with self-managed.
You don't
funds,
deal
no.
with that, so your company only deals directly as a provider service for people without doing self-managed
Yes,
funds?
correct.
Okay, fair enough.
I want to clarify something.
Wait a second, wait, yeah.
We will get to you.
Yeah. I'm coming, yeah?
So there are a number of providers around that give out services as self-managed funds. But what I also see is a lot of the providers are too scared to say what they can offer, what people are eligible for, what they can get. Right, I mean that people don't know what they can have.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I see that out there. If there are services that handle that sort of thing, as in to help provide people with more information of what's so-called now reasonable or not reasonable, like with your personal care, what is reasonable, what is not reasonable?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure if I can actually answer that because it's not. We deal with only
providing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, fair enough. Okay.
So maybe we can park that and
Yeah, we'll
then
park
get
that.
some
Yeah.
information around that. Thanks.
We'll give it to you anyway.
Just a quick question.
Just keep talking.
Quick question to Rodney. Can you elaborate a little bit on how the means-tested fee is being established? It's a long pro forma, I'm aware, but I would like to hear your opinion.
Did you say it's a long form? Is that what you said? Yes. Okay, now I'm with you. It's a Centrelink document is 40 pages, 140 questions. Don't be intimidated by that because you may not need to complete it. It should only be completed at the end if in conjunction with your financial advisor he thinks it's of value to you to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of people are asked to complete it. I remember that day I went, 5 or 6 people threw this form in my hand. So I'm an ex-lawyer, I'm not intimidated by documentation, but I found that unbelievably overwhelming. It's terribly overwhelming, filling this document in the middle of everything else. So I say to people, don't worry about it. We need to do the modelling first to see whether you should submit it. If you don't need to submit it, you don't submit it. So I say my advice tonight on that is don't be concerned about it. It's the last thing we look at, not the first.
Other questions?
Any other questions?
Tull, I just had a question for you. A lot of people need what I call occasional care. It's not regular, and they don't necessarily know when it's going to come about. How do they sign up and get themselves to pre-plan for that, if you will?
You could just call us. No, occasional care is something very regular, and it's really just obviously the more planning we can do, the better. So a couple of days or a week. That afternoon makes it a bit difficult, but it's definitely doable.
Right. And also, you said about getting into the system that it could take a year. Is there any tricks for people to speed that process up?
Yeah, so if care is needed, as I mentioned before, you have the option of private care. So it is about $68 an hour as an example. If you need some private care just for a little bit while you're waiting for a home care package, and then you can either just forget about the private care if the hours are enough in the home care package, or you can do a mix.
Right. And can you set up your separate funds or something like tax deferred or advantage to pre-plan for that? Does it kind of add up?
Yeah, it can add up. I mean, there is it can get very expensive. We're talking about 24-hour care is up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it can become very, very expensive. But occasional care, as an example, or a few hours a week, is hopefully doable.
You're sort of round the clock care can get really expensive, and Rodney, you unfortunately found out the hard way, right? Can you speak a little bit about when do you decide about if you have 24-hour care at home versus an aged care facility?
It's a matter of personal choice for the person who needs care. You can have 24-hour care to your last breath. It's all about money and whether you're getting the right care. So everyone gets to the point at a different time themselves whether it's not working and they need to go into care. What we haven't mentioned tonight, and this goes partly towards your answer, is a really beautiful word in this whole sector, and that's called respite. Now, respite is really try before you buy. So respite is terrific because you can just do that. You can go in for a couple of weeks of respite. You can do it in a few places. In theory, you get 63 days a year of respite, and that only costs you the $59 a day, and maybe the extra service fee depending on the facility. So you don't get caught up, you're tied up. It's not a high expense, and it's a good way to trial it. And again, over the 10 years, our experience has shown that people may even be reluctant to go into respite the first time. Once they get in there, they subconsciously realise, hey, this isn't too bad. I feel more secure. I'm getting 3 meals a day. I'm being stimulated. I'm not staring at the same 4 walls. They're often much nicer, more brand new facilities than where they've come from at their homes. So respite often leads to permanent care. And my tip too, if you want to encouraging someone, you feel they need to get to permanent care and you've got them halfway into respite, work with the facility before they enter to choose a room that you think might be the right room for them to stay in, rather than going into a room that's not as nice and maybe designated for respite. The facilities will cooperate with you. The facilities want beds to be occupied. Don't make any mistake about that. They need occupancy. That's their revenue. So you speak to them and say, look, we're hoping this will lead to permanent care, but I want a right room, I want everything to be done in order for that to be enticing, and they'll work with you. So I think respite is something that we should always think of.
And I think just to add to that as well, when you have a level 3, level 4 home care package, the box is automatically ticked for you to be able to go to respite as well.
Hang on a second. Yeah.
Can you push yourself into respite?
Sure.
Just to get away from my kids?
This is for Rodney. You mentioned that the trend is now like Bethlehem, where you have aged care and independent living. I was wondering whether, I read somewhere where they've got a pilot in Shepparton based on a Holland model where they have a village where normal and dementia people are together and there's music all around. I'm just wondering whether any of you know of that.
I definitely know of the concept. I think there's also one in Tasmania. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's a very, very, very interesting and well-renowned concept, I think, from Holland.
You know the number, maybe I can call them.
Yeah, sure. Send me on there.
My preference is a cruise ship.
Sorry?
My preference is a cruise ship. Just check yourself.
Sorry. Isn't it true that most of the aged care facilities now don't have a specific dementia department? I thought that, no, they tried to make them all inclusive anyway. So, yeah, the residents live, together.
Well, you're touching on something. They've abolished the distinction. They don't use high care and low care as a distinction anymore.
I thought they just don't.
No, but it's a very important point you raise. As we tell people, you certainly don't want, the worst thing you can do is move someone twice. So if you think someone has got, their mind is letting them down, they've got dementia, then they want to be moved into a facility where as it deteriorates, there's a memory support unit in that facility. So it's not easy moving them a second time. Now, not every facility has that. So you've got to choose. We just look after the financials to try and assist. But the other more important part is you've got to talk to the clinical people to assess whether this is the right place for your mother or father now and in the future. But yeah, they don't all have that.
I've done that, been there. The only thing is I've heard in recent times, just very quickly, I've heard that they don't want to label the dementia units.
It's called memory support now. It's just
memory support. So it's still a unit?
Well, it exists for people who need it.
It exists.
But not in every facility.
Excuse me, I went into respite. I can tell you about it.
You don't have to. They told you that. I'm Rodney's daughter, I'm Rodney's daughter, and I'm working with the facilities. A lot of facilities will have dementia people that don't have behavioural issues with everyone else, and they don't have memory support units. But if they have behavioural issues and they need special care, then they need to be someone with a memory support unit. So you speak to them, or your ACAS assessment will usually determine which facilities you can be at.
Right, but all the facilities still sort of expected to take in dementia patients with issues. For example, if they do have behavioural problems?
So if they have behavioural problems, a lot of Jewish care has 3 facilities, and I think 1 or 2 of them have dementia units, but 1 of them doesn't. So if they had behavioural issues, they would recommend those facilities. Same with our care, some of them have special memory support units and some don't. So if it's just that they have dementia but they don't have behavioural issues, they could be at any our care. But if they have behavioural issues, they'll recommend something else.
Sorry, Mel, I might take over from you now.
Yes.
I'm Jess, I'm from Jewish Care. Hi. Yes, it's true. So we have 3 nursing homes. One of those is Gary Smorgan House in Caulfield. Everyone knows Gary Smorgan House. It's the community home. We have a memory support unit that's dedicated to looking after residents and loved ones who are living with dementia, who aren't able to, look after their safety. And part of that reason is because they don't really know where they are anymore. They're looking to leave without anybody knowing. They're walking around and they need the space to move and to be around. So that's really important for us. But we also have residents who come into care living with dementia that need a more integrated lifestyle. So they're what we call pleasantly confused. They're not sure what the date is. They know that they're having salmon on their bagel, and if you come out with Vegemite, it's a no-go. So they know what's happening. Their short-term memory is more affected. So, but what we do is we try and match people to, based on their interests, what their care needs are, and we look after them as a whole. And I guess it comes down to what both Tull and Rodney were saying earlier. It all comes down to planning. So someone coming into care with dementia may not need dementia care and may never need dementia care as it deteriorates because they're comfortable where they are. They know the home, they know the staff, they're comfortable. If you're coming in a little bit later, sometimes that is a little bit more difficult and you do need the support of a memory support unit.
Thank you.
Just following up on Norbert's question, you said, well, you have to plan. Now, it's someone in her 70s who is well, not demented, healthy. How do we know what to plan for? No, absolutely. I mean, where do I go?
It's a great question because we always say when we're sitting up here, you have to plan, but nobody plans, right? but you're definitely right. I think when you start to feel that you may need a little bit of help, that's when you possibly start to think about it. But planning is the best. But to your point, if you're healthy, why would you?
No. I'm happy to plan, but I don't know what to do.
I can say for sure it will cost you more than you think it will.
I suppose the planning we're talking about is having the provision of some savings. The planning is having provision of savings to fund your care. That's the planning. And you've got to do what I do. You've got to stop being generous to your children because you'll need that money. They've had enough out of you.
I'd just like to ask a question in reference to people that can't afford services such as yourself, Rodney, or different services that they homes, they pay rental properties, they then to go into some of these places like our care or the Jewish care, the private facilities and things like that. How many beds are available to those people that cannot afford?
There's always a bed available.
There's always a bed available? They'll always find a bed available for one of the private.
Yep. No one will be denied an aged care bed.
Nobody will be denied an aged care bed.
Jess and Jewish Care said there's always a bed available for concessional, didn't you, Jess?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
There's always, okay. Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. But also for services such as yourself, for people that can't afford.
You can't afford our services, we'll still look after you.
Okay.
We'll charge Caulfield Shule.
We just need to finish up so maybe.
Thanks, you guys really start to make me think. So I've got a question for Reverend, because you haven't had a chance to. So in thinking about where am I going to go, one issue is, should I pick a Jewish place, a retirement place or not. What's the role of rabbis, or what do Jewish places offer? And does it actually work? I mean, I assume that they cater the whole range of different Jewish levels of religiosity. I mean, how does one decide which one to pick?
Great question. So look, I've obviously had the experience of visiting people in both Jewish aged care facilities and non-Jewish aged care facilities, and I think going back to what Rodney said, it's all about personal choice. Well, from what I've seen, and obviously I'm biased in the question, I would obviously encourage someone to go to a Jewish aged care facility. There's kosher food, the activities are Jewish based, although every Friday afternoon we do a pre-Shabbat program at our care, which is not technically a Jewish program. So I think it's obviously for someone who maybe feel a bit uncomfortable going into an aged care facility to begin with, if they see all the familiar faces, they see the customs, the traditions, the kosher food, I think that probably will make the transition a lot more suitable. And of course, as I said, Jewish care in particular, they have dedicated rabbis who work there full time. So they've got if you need a place to go to talk to a rabbi, they obviously have shuls that are attached to the aged care facilities. So I think there's a good reason, if it's possible from the other perspective, to attend the Jewish care. That's my view.
Everybody, just conscious of time here, and Rabbi Rabin, since you have the microphone, maybe it's a great place to finish. The role.
Okay, thank you. So I was given exactly 3 minutes or so to talk. I like what Greg said in the beginning, that statistic. I'd like you to send it to me, that if you attend shul regularly, they say you'll live an extra 7 years, it was?
Yep.
So I expect to see you all here on Saturday morning. I think I was added to this panel not to obviously give any advice on the logistical side of it, on the financial side, because I don't have that experience. But it was amazing, because today I was unfortunate to drive for a bit of distance to a funeral, and I was listening to a shiur, and it was all hashgacha pratit, divine providence, that the person I was listening to mentioned the following midrash, a really strange midrash on the first go. It comes based on the works of Kohelet. And the midrash there says, and you may have heard this midrash before, but the midrash says that at different stages of our lives we compare to different things. And the midrash says when you're a baby you compare to a king or a queen. When you're 3 years old, says the midrash, you're compared to a pig. Okay, so really it's like, whoa, what's this midrash talking about? I'm listening to the right religion. When you're 10 years old, I'm going to stand up, I like to stand. When you're 10 years old, it says you're compared to a goat. When you're looking to get married, you're compared to a stallion, a very big and proud horse. When you get married, you're then compared to a donkey. And then it says, once you have children, you're compared to a dog. But here comes the strangest one. It says when you're older, you're compared to a monkey. So again, I was a bit shocked by this midrash. And so I looked into it today, and it explained the following, which I think relates to what we're talking about over here. It said that when you're a child, when you're a baby, why are you compared to a king and a queen? Because everybody wants to see the king and queen. Everybody wants to hug the king and queen and kiss the king and queen. Look how many people logged on to watch the coronation. When you're 3 years old, you're compared to a pig because pigs want to put everything in their mouths. Okay? When you're 10, you're like a goat. You have so much energy. You're bouncing everywhere and you're driving your parents crazy because they have to keep chasing you. When you want to get married, you want to groom yourself, you want to look nice so you can find a suitable match. Once you get married, you turn to the donkey because it's a lot of work to stay married. It's a schlep. And then when you have children, says the midrash, you're like a dog because dogs are always looking for the next meal and they're trying to find food. And to feed your kids is hard because you've got to run around and work hard, and everything you're thinking about is how am I going to feed my children? But then the question was, why does the midrash compare an older person to a monkey? It seems rather insulting. And so I saw a beautiful insight by the Kotzker Rebbe. Kotzker Rebbe had really beautiful sayings and teachings. Says the Kotzker Rebbe, what does a monkey do? A monkey imitates. And he says when a person gets older, unfortunately, a lot of people think it's at that point where you can just imitate whatever you've done up until that point. You may feel it's, I've already lived my life, I don't need to do anything exciting anymore. I don't have to necessarily worry about growing, learning, developing. I'm just going to imitate whatever feels comfortable, whatever feels safe. And so sadly, we often put people as they get older into that box and said, as long as they're in a comfortable little place, that's okay. As a rabbi, as I said, I've had the opportunity to visit many people. I even did, when I was studying a master's in psychotherapy and counseling, I did my placement at Jewish Care. And one of the opportunities I had to counsel people was, I worked in the residential places in Jewish Care. So I got to sit with people who were in aged care, and I would have 45-minute counseling sessions with them. And I have to tell you, every single person that I sat with, what was the one thing that they felt that they needed in their life? Besides obviously having family visit them, stimulation. They wanted to learn. They wanted to grow. And they felt so often that everybody around them felt, no, you just need to imitate from this point onwards. And so the Midrash was not insulting us, it was warning us. That besides for getting involved in all the planning of everything else, of the financial side, the logistics side, the medical side, and I think it goes back to your question, you've got to also remember where you're going to be able to not be a monkey. What's going to support you to continue to learn, to be stimulated, to grow. And if you have the opportunity at certain aged cares to visit, we host Jewish care a lot, other aged cares, they come for shul services. So you want to continue learning and growing. And so if I could just conclude by saying that in Jewish tradition, we know how valuable we view people who get older. If you look through the Talmud, you look through all the Torah itself, honor your parents. It's all about honoring and seeing that the wisdom of aging, we have to continue to honor and cherish. But if we just, as I said, forget that at that point it's whatever they've learned till now, which is of course we want to glean from the wisdom, but it shouldn't stop there. And of course everyone has their own capabilities and personalities, but I think hopefully we can all be like kings and queens even as we get older throughout our lives, where people want to be around us, where we're going to get that engagement, that feeling of connection, of learning, of growing. And my blessing to all of us is that no matter what direction or path we go down, that we should feel that we can still continue to learn and grow. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you to the organisers for tonight. It's a great privilege to have you with us.
Thank you, everybody. Feel free to stay for coffee and cakes. There are representatives from Jewish Care around, B'nai B'rith. If you have a question in private or just want to talk to somebody, there are people here.